Thank you so much for hopping on here today on the Ripple Effect with Ray. Excited to get to know you, your experience, and thanks for being here.
Happy to be here and looking forward to it. Love the name, the ripple effect. It's totally
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely. So tell me, Bill, how and why did you start NutriSelect?
Well, that's a bit of a long story, but it kind of goes back to for years, I've been in this industry, supplement industry for almost 30 years, it seems like. And so NutriSelect's my ninth startup, actually. So I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. So, but this one's different, right? Because before it was either taking a new product to market or I actually ran a CRO, contract research organization, different things. It just kind of led me to do those. But I was kind of sitting with this about a year and a half ago, and I said, beginning of 2024, I guess, and I was thinking, what am I going to do next? I was in transition, and I said to myself, what's the biggest problem I could solve in my industry? And of course, came to me immediately. It's kind of obvious because for years, people will come up to me and say, hey, Dr. Bell, what do I take for this? And that's always, I can tell you all about the science. I can tell you, how the regulations and all that. But then when people would ask me, what do I take for this? It's hard to answer because there's too many products on the market. And how do you know where the science is? It requires me as a scientist in this space quite an exercise to go identify if a product or ingredient actually is legit versus someone who's a consumer, which their spectrum of knowledge is down here, right? I also had a lot of experience when I worked at Sanofi for about almost 4 years. I worked with their M&A group. We were evaluating acquisition targets in the space for the U.S. market. They didn't have a supplement brand in that market, and we looked at dozens of products, or I mean companies, and some of those are multi-million dollar companies. You would know the brands if I told you, but they didn't have the science to support their product. So this was another thing that kind of gave me the impetus to really move forward with NutriSelect. So last year was the year of doing a lot of due diligence, interviewing engineers and saying, hey, here's my vision. I want a tool for consumers. Forget my industry trying to do the right thing. Forget regulators, FDA in Washington for doing the right thing. Let's give it the power back to the consumers. So I want a tool that they can use to find science-based supplements that are truly matched to their profile and with real-time wellness tracking and everything. I said, does the technology exist for me to do that? And the answer was yes. And of course, there's a lot of people leveraging AI. We're leveraging AI. It's not all of it, but the AI is only as good as the data sets that you're building. And so this is why a lot of people don't understand that. They see AI everywhere, and it's kind of like the GPT wrappers, we call them, But that's what got me started with that. And I'm kind of a technology nerd. I've been looking for ways to advance or change the way we do research in the space since 2018, actually. I've been looking at different emerging technologies.
Amazing. Well, walk me through a little bit about what NutriSelect does as far as does it do differently than what's out there on the market? Why does it exist?
Again, we're an early stage company, so we haven't launched yet. So that's going to happen next year. The consumer app will launch probably in Q2 next year. And we're on track to do that. We developed the prototype already last year, and then we're in MVP development right now, and then beta launch maybe in Q1. So for the consumer, first of all, there's not, if you think about my industry for a moment, there's like three pillars within that. And the first is safety, the second was label claim, and the third, efficacy. All right. And so those first two really got tackled some years ago in our industry. So I was actually one of the first people to advise NSF to develop their third-party certification program that looked at safety and label claim. So believe it or not, people have product on the market that said it had X amount of that particular ingredient, but when tested, or almost nothing. And so you would think that the regulations would cover that. Well, there are regulations that say how you're supposed to label, but the third-party certification verifies that companies are doing that. And then safety is always an issue. There's been plenty of examples over the years for adulteration, that sort of thing. Botanical identification is key. Garbage in, garbage out. If it's not the right botanical and identified in the beginning, and there's a lot of plants that look similar and as extracts, that could be the same colored powder. So it's like, how do you know the difference? So that's what those programs tackled. So you had NSF, USP, and a number of other ones when they launched early 2000, somewhere around 2000, I think. So, but efficacy has been sitting there on the fence for the last 2 decades. And the industry has advanced in terms of an evolution and in terms of doing more on the science. You see more CROs and more pioneering type CROs coming on the scene now, like Radical Science or Alethio's is another one, Reputable Health. You have wearable devices. So it's moving in the direction that I was trying to get it to move back in 2012 when I was running my CRO. I was too early to market for that one, by the way. Um, but anyway, so this is the evolution of the industry, which is more sophisticated than it was, 25, 30 years ago. But still today, the consumers, the way to describe it, the industry is that the science is subjective and there's a lot of marketing hype, good or bad. That's the way it is because of the regulations, and that's the barrier to entry to the market. That's good for you're doing a business, but it opens the door to, the opportunities to kind of talk about things they don't really have. So how do we fix that? And, consumers throw their hands up in the air, right? And they say, okay, FDA, you need to regulate this. And the industry is split 50-50 on mandatory product listing, for example. Nobody wants that. There's a lot of folks in my industry that talk about doing the science, but they're really sitting on the fence and not really taking that bold step to really do that. Some companies are, but there's still a lot that are not. So how do we change that? Give the power back to consumers. That they don't have to search on Google anymore. They'll be able to use our app to find the actual products that have science because we have a patent pending platform, Precision Supplement Intelligence platform, and our N score rating system that isn't brand specific. It has to do only on the science. If you've got a branded, particular ingredient that's branded that has known to have a lot of research, well, that's going to affect your overall product score, that sort of thing. The reality is nobody's ever measured, and there's no way metric to do this, is like how many products on the market today, of 100,000 products in the US market alone, how many of those actually really have the science to support their claims? I shudder to think that probably 80% don't. It's an estimate, and I've talked to others that have been in the industry a long time, and I actually said 65. Somebody else said, oh no, it's probably 70 or 80, So it's like, that's disturbing to me, you know? And there are a lot of commodity products, right? That, something cheap you go buy at Walmart or something like that. There's a lot of those types of products. So those will have their own category and fall in a separate place. But if people are really trying to take control of their health and be proactive, which consumers are doing today, they're going to love this tool because it's going to be able to not only educate them, but evolve over time as they're using it to tell them what they need in terms of deficiencies or whatever. At some point, I intend to layer in genomics and all kinds of things like that. That's down the road for that we expand on the features and stuff like that.
That's so interesting and very relevant. And also, I mean, I think the statistic that you shared, I wouldn't even know where to start with trying to guess what is
Yeah,
actually accurate as far as the field of supplementation goes, right? And I
right.
think what it claims, but I think, what would you say has been working really well for you and the company? And what would you say has been maybe a little bit more challenging or frustrating?
Well, as with any venture, I'll start with the frustrating piece. You can't get too discouraged there because only you, as a founder, have the vision of what it is you want to create. I mean, it's very clear in my mind. It's like I wish I could turn on a light switch and then boom, we go to that model of objective science and real evidence for the supplements people are taking. But the reality is there's going to be a transition, right? Yeah, it has to reach a critical mass in terms of being viral, where people, that's the only thing they use, then suddenly don't buy those products anymore that they were their favorite brands that don't rate. Okay. So that's the frustrating part is dealing with people, even people I've known for years in my industry who, at some level, they think it's innovative what I'm doing. They know the problem, but they don't want to necessarily engage at this stage because they don't really want to know what their products rate at or their ingredients. That's the subconscious for them. Maybe they're aware of it, but I think on some level there's like, I don't think I really want to know. We'll wait till you do the app and then we'll see. Well, it'll be too late for them then. So, you know. And the first part of that was, sorry, what was the first part again you were asking me?
What's working well, what's been challenging or
Well,
frustrating?
actually focusing the flip side of that, entities out there, companies who get it, who share the same vision. We all want to advance evidence-based supplementation, right? And so those are those new CROs on the scene that I talked about. Well, over the summer, we're getting ready to announce on Monday our fourth CRO partner that's partnering with us. I'm building a consortium. I just decided I want to bring in all the people who are like me that have this vision. We have different businesses and what we're doing, but there's definitely synergies in what we're doing. We can collaborate, and I got immediate engagement from that, of course. And then the other thing I had in my mind, and by the way, I'll use your title of your podcast, Ripple Effect, to illustrate this on a call it a spiritual manifestation sort of thing. When you throw a pebble in the pond, the ripples go out, which is analogous to setting your vision of what you want to create. It comes back. Eventually, it's going to bounce off and come back to you, right?
Hmm.
That's what's happened. I had two companies approach me. One we've already announced, the other one I can't announce yet. But had in my mind or my vision down the road after the app launch. Okay, I want to identify health professional networks that I can bring in. Well, and those ecosystems. And then we license the API. Well, I had two companies approach me early on to do that this summer. Exactly that. One we signed an LOI with, and the other one is still in play. I can't talk about that, but they're a huge health professional network. There's not an existing network where you can go to find, because this is perfect for like an MD or an ND or a chiropractor, whatever, any kind of nutritionist. They can use this tool for patient intake because some consumers are, they still want their doctor to do all that. So we're going to plug into those ecosystems as well. And we already have people identified to do that. So there'll be more once we start announcing those next year. We get the beta out and start doing that. And then we'll grow from there. But what is worked, and of course, we're raising capital. So, and I've done this before many times, and it's a different climate right now. Of course, all the investments going into AI. If you've seen any of the news, you can't miss it. And that's true, that segment, and every industry is being impacted that. But there's a lot of crap out there. There's not really legitimate businesses to invest in that space. People are using that as a leverage to get money. But the reality is, in the last 2, 3 years, and I'm an advisor with startups.com and the network there, it's pretty much nuclear winter right now for raising capital. It's just macroeconomics. So it's probably one of the toughest times to raise capital. And so fortunately, we have commitments for investment we just received in the last couple, 3 weeks. So, and that only came from all the traction of building valuation and value into the NutriSelect business. We're still pre-revenue, but all that traction that we did in terms of, creating the vision of supporting the vision of what we want to do in the space was very attractive to people. So there you go.
Amazing. Well, thanks for answering that in such a eloquent and detailed way. And I think there's something to be said about, the way that your mind works and functions. I mean, you've started 9 companies, and
Yeah, I know.
that is more than a majority of people, I think,
Yeah.
that are out here. But what would you say to maybe some of our listeners that are maybe just starting out with their first business or first company, first health and wellness company? What would you tell them?
It's not for the faint of heart. Okay. So don't be naive about it. It's a lot of work. And I even debated whether I wanted to do this. Look, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. I'm not in my 20s doing this, but I'm very passionate about my industry and doing all that. So I'd say if there's anything you want to do, you have a passion for something, first of all need to have a passion. You have to love whatever it is you want to do. And if you don't, and you're just doing it to build a business to make money, you're going to fail. Okay. Because you don't have a vested interest when those long days getting up in the morning and saying, I got to do this, this, and this, I got to talk to these investors, whatever, you know, you won't be able to have the fuel in the tank to do that because you won't have that passion for creating that. I say the second thing is you got to have that. The second thing is you need to validate your idea. Okay, don't get the cart before the horse. You may have a great idea. I've had plenty of them, but I never acted on them. And you've got to investigate that. So I spent months last year before we ever founded the company to do the due diligence, ID validation, surveyed daily supplement users. Hey, and this was early before I even knew all the features we're going to have today. This is over a year ago. And I had enough feedback from that to validate my idea, and then also interviewing engineers and say, okay, can we build this tech on the back end? I thought we could because I knew enough about the technology to do that. So you really need to validate your idea, and you spend time doing. We tell advise startups and startups.com network to exactly that. Those are the first steps. You want to validate your idea on what you're doing. You would want to know if somebody's actually going to buy your product or your service. You may think they are, but they may not.
Exactly. No, I think that's such a great point that you need to validate and see, are people going to be interested? It's one thing to be interested, but are people going to actually act on it and buy? And what does that actually look like, feel like? So, what would you say is your vision for the company in the next 6 months, 12 months, couple years from now?
Well, I think for me, obviously, in the next 6 to 8 months, getting our app to market. And it's not going to have all the features. It won't have, you don't want to sit there and get stuck in making it perfect and think you got everything, because you want to be able to iterate. And we're following a lean startup method, right? So it's like, okay, we build something, get feedback, tweak it, feedback, tweak it, and do that. But in the next 6 to 8 months, for sure, in Q2, by the end of Q2, app and market. And in that time frame as well, in parallel, activating, it makes sense. There's a number of B2B avenues for us that we can license the API, that sort of thing, and activate those. So it's going to be an exciting year next year. The other, I have a 5-year plan, right? I mean, there's a business plan that has 5-year projections and all that kind of stuff. I know, having done this so many times, it can take longer, or it could pivot to something I hadn't thought of, or whatever. There's so many possibilities here. And so I think it's really important to be flexible. But overall, my gut tells me that in a couple of years, somebody's going to buy us. It's not going to, I'm not ever going to get to 5-year plan before somebody's going to want to gobble us up because what we're doing really is cool, and some of those kind of resources. And I'll be okay with that, by the way. I can work on my books. I can do my public speaking. I got my TEDx talk coming up next year, probably in the first part of the year. So, build that in terms of my personal brand and stuff like that, which is at the foundation of NutriSelect as well. But yeah, I'm open to that. So at some point, I'll hand it off to somebody else if they're the right ones to take it from my vision to fruition there, so to speak.
Vision to fruition. I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, right now, for our listeners, I guess, would you be looking for beta users, or where and how can people find you right?
Yeah, that's good. That's a great question. So for sure, go to the NutriSelect.ai website. It's NUTRI select.ai. And there you can click on a button there to sign up on the wait list. And so we have people signing up almost every day. It's organically growing, but we want to when we do beta, we want to have 1,000 users. Okay. So we're on our way to that, and get a lot of really great feedback from everybody on the beta use of that. Okay. And so that's what you do. Go to the website and sign up, and get ready for what's coming.
Amazing. Well, Bill, thanks so much for joining me here today on The Ripple Effect with Ray. I'm excited to hear what our listeners have to say about today's episode. Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you for having me.